Chapter 1052. The insect swarm hovered in the air for a while and went back to hibernation after losing sight of Lu Yi. Lu Ye's expression was solemn. He had just returned to the land of the 9 prefectures and was immersed in the joy of returning to his homeland. He did not pay much attention to it. Now, he finally saw something unusual. The most obvious change was the Li Plains. The Li Plains was a huge plain. It was also a strategic buffer for the Wanmo Ridge in the military province. There was no human habitation here, but since it was a plain, it was naturally full of vitality. At the very least, when Lu Yi came here with the Nian Yuxian last time, the Li Plains was green when he looked down from the sky. However, the current Li Plains was no longer green. All that entered their eyes was desolation, without a single trace of life. Combined with the insect swarm he saw just now, Lu Yi understood the root cause of all this. Wherever the insect clan passed by, not even a blade of grass grew. There was a lot of information in the battlefield imprint, which was sent by Yi just now. Lu Yi continued to check. The more he read, the happier he was. He did not expect such a big thing to happen in the 2 years when he was not in the land of the 9 prefectures. The insect swarm swept across the land of the 9 prefectures. The scale and intensity of the insect swarm this time was the most ferocious and terrifying in the history of the land of the 9 prefectures. Every piece of land and every corner of the land of the 9 prefectures was invaded by the insect clan. When the insect swarm broke out in the Foggy Sea last time, many sects within a radius of 10,000 miles spent a lot of effort to extinguish the insect swarm. However, the scale of the insect swarm was limited and the impact was not great. However, the situation this time was completely different. It was no longer an insect swarm, but an insect swarm. Not only was there a large number of insects, but there were also a large number of divine sea realm cultivators among the various insects. The insect swarm broke out 2 years ago, which was almost the time when Lu Yi left the land of the 9 prefectures. The origin was a huge earthquake that swept across the land of the 9 prefectures. The whole world was in turmoil. Deep cracks appeared all over the land of the 9 prefectures. Overnight, the land of the 9 prefectures became a paradise for the insect clan. Due to the insect swarm, the dispute between the 2 camps of the Haotian Alliance and the Wanmo Ridge calmed down a lot. Now, almost all the cultivators were fighting against the insect clan. The cultivators understood that both the Haotian Alliance and the Myriad Demons Ridge were humans after all. However, the insect race was a mutant. Under such a crisis, they could put aside the grudges between their own race. Eliminating the mutants was their top priority. According to Yi, these insects came from the depths of the earth. In the past, they did not appear and were not known. After all, cultivators would not go too deep into the earth because of the interference of the magnetic field. The deeper they went, the more their spiritual power would be suppressed. Therefore, the depths of the earth had always been a forbidden zone for cultivators. However, after the earthquake that swept through the entire 9 regions, cracks appeared on the ground, and the insect race emerged from underground. It was unknown how many years these insects had reproduced. There were many kinds of insects, and their numbers were huge. Although the cultivators of the 9 regions had been bravely killing these insects for the past year, they still couldn't kill them all. There was no way to destroy the hive. The hive was hidden in the depths of the earth and was extremely difficult to find. Once, a group of divine ocean realm cultivators went there, but they returned in failure. The deeper they went, the more insects there were, and the more their cultivation would be suppressed. Moreover, in such an environment, once a battle broke out, it would be endless. Unless they succeeded in one strike, it would be difficult to accomplish anything. This was a disaster. However, to the cultivators of the 9 regions, it was also a feast. Because killing the insects could earn them war merits. Lu Yi checked his war merits and found that there were indeed a few hundred more points. To the cultivators of the 9 regions, war merits ran through their entire cultivation life. The latter was especially important as it could be used to exchange for spiritual sticks for cultivation. Usually, there were not many ways for everyone to earn war merits. The war merits of the prefecture guards of the various regions were basically given out through their monthly salary. The amount was fixed unless they went to carry out some missions. However, killing the insects could earn war merits. It was very convenient. This led to a phenomenon. In the Cloud River battlefield, the number of cultivators decreased greatly. Basically, any Cloud River realm cultivator with a bit of ambition and foundation would leave the Cloud River battlefield and return to the 9 regions to kill the insects. Now, in the Cloud River battlefield, there were basically no cultivators above the 5th order Cloud River realm. They all ran back to the 9 regions. They could not deal with the insects that were too strong, but the insect race's biggest advantage was their numbers. Although there were powerful insects, compared to their overall numbers, they were not worth mentioning. Therefore, as long as one's luck was not too bad, one could casually walk around and gain something. There was no need to mention the true Lake Realm cultivators. In these 2 years, many cultivators of the 9 regions had died, but which one of them did not gain a lot? In the past, they had to calculate their war merits to exchange for spiritual sticks for cultivation. Now, there was no need for that. If they did not have war merits, they could go kill the insects. After killing for a while, they would have war merits. Not to mention others, just take the members of Team D9 for example. In these 2 years, the overall cultivation of the team had increased significantly. 2 years. The timing was very coincidental. Luyi could not help but think. What made him even more concerned was that he had vaguely seen the silhouettes of many insectoids on a certain floating continent on his way back to the 9 states. However, he had only caught a glimpse of them at the time and couldn't be completely sure that they were insectoids. But if it was really the insect race that gathered on a floating continent, were they related to the insect disaster this time? He could not be sure. Team D9 was now led by 3rd senior brother Xiaoxinghe. Right now, they were stationed in a city, guarding the safety of that city with other cultivators. This could not be helped. The insect disaster had swept across the 9 regions. No matter how strong the sects were, they had the ability to protect themselves. However, it was not the same for the cities where many mortals gathered. They needed the nearby sects to transfer manpower to assist in the defense. Some sects had a good foundation and could transfer enough manpower, but some sects had a weak foundation and did not have many people available at all. They could only ask for help from Grand Sky City. Team D9 was sent out under such circumstances. In 2 years, the team had traveled through half of the war province. Right now, they were in the 7th city that they were responsible for assisting in the defense. Rebirth, the great era of waves. Through the many messages sent by Luyi roughly understood the current situation of the 9 regions. Take care of yourselves. I will return to Grand Sky City first and then look for you guys. Luyi transmitted. You have to be careful too, replied. On the city wall of Red River City, he ended the transmission and smiled as if relieved of a heavy burden. It was great that Luyi was back. Beside her, the members of Team D9 gathered and listened to relay Luyi's words. Xiaoxinghe laughed heartily. Little junior brother is back. We should congratulate him with insect blood. Everyone, follow me to kill some insects. Since senior brother has given the order, little brother will follow. Li Baxian stood up. A moment later, the team rushed out of the city under Xiaoxinghe's lead and killed their way out. On the Li Plains, Luyi activated the 1,000-faced spirit tattoos to change his appearance. He also changed the color of the Scarlet Dragon battle clothes to white. He put away the mountain pan saber and hung the sword gourd on his waist. In an instant, the handsome sword cultivator was born. After all, this was the territory of the myriad demon Ridge. It was troublesome to act with his original appearance. Although he had reached the Divine Sea realm, there were many people stronger than him in the vast 9 regions. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was invincible. If he could avoid trouble, he would naturally try to keep a low profile. Riding on a sword light, he rushed forward. Along the way, he encountered scattered insects from time to time. Many of them were quite strong. Luyi had a slight understanding of how bad the insect disaster in the 9 regions was. If the deserted Li Plains was like this, one could imagine what it would be like in a place with people. After traveling for 2 hours, he gained a few hundred battle merits. This made him sigh. Although the 9 regions' environment was bad, It was much easier for cultivators to obtain battle merits than before. Of course, the risks were also relatively high. But this was how cultivation was. If you wanted to obtain, you had to pay a price and take risks. Many of the insects he killed along the way were in the true lake realm. He did not encounter any divine sea realm insects, but that did not mean that there were none. Just like the mosquito-like insect he first encountered. A single insect was nothing, but once they gathered into a swarm, even he had to retreat. Suddenly, a wave of spiritual energy came from a direction. Lu Yi turned his head and saw a few cultivators running for their lives in that direction. A mantis insect was chasing closely behind them. The cultivators he encountered in such a place were naturally from the myriad demon ridge. In the past, Lu Yi probably would not care about the life or death of these people. The opposing factions destined him to be enemies with the people of the myriad demon ridge. But the trip to the blood refining realm made him feel a lot. The biggest feeling was that the cultivators of the two factions could coexist peacefully. They could also unite for a goal. He had received many favors from the old seniors in the blood refining realm. Half of them were from the myriad demon ridge. Of course, this was related to the special situation of the blood refining realm. It was also related to the state of mind of the old seniors. At their level, many of the grievances and grudges from when they were young could be forgotten with a smile. Before he left, many of the old seniors gave him their respective tokens. They said that if he encountered any disciples who bullied him, he should take out this token and show it to them. But from another point of view, those old seniors also had the intention of letting Lu Yi help their disciples and granddisciples when they were in danger. It was just that some words were not easy to say. They had seen Lu Yi's ability. They knew that as long as Lu Yi was given enough time, he would definitely be able to reach their level or even surpass them. When that time came, who would be his opponent in the 9 continents? The different tokens were a sign of trust, as well as a kind of invisible entrustment. The trip to the blood refining realm had made some subtle changes in Lu Yi's state of mind. In the past, when he saw the cultivators of the myriad demon ridge, his first thought was how to kill them. But now he would not. Who knew if there were any descendants of the old seniors among the cultivators of the myriad demon ridge, although the probability was very small. Chapter 1053. The cultivators who were escaping were all in the true lake realm, and the spirit energy fluctuations coming from their leader were at the 6th order true lake realm. This was a 4-man team with decent strength. However, they were still being chased into a corner because the insect that was chasing them was in the spirit sea realm. The team of 4 was out to hunt insects, and such teams could be found everywhere in the 9 provinces. At first, everything went smoothly, so they ventured deeper into the forest. Who would have thought that they would meet an undefeatable opponent? Now, one of the 4 was seriously injured and was being held in the arms of one of their companions, covered in blood. The other 2 used their own methods to block the insect's attacks. One was a Dharma cultivator, so his techniques were quite powerful, while the other was a ghost cultivator. In such a situation, the ghost cultivator's usefulness was limited. The ghost cultivator's specialty was sneak attacks, but if they were to face the enemy head-on, their strength would be reduced. This ghost cultivator's specialty was to escape 1,000 miles away if they failed to kill the enemy. In the current situation, if the ghost cultivator abandoned his companions and fled, he would still have a chance to survive. He was the fastest, and he didn't need to be faster than the spirit sea realm insect. He only needed to be faster than his 3 companions. However, he obviously didn't have the intention to escape alone. He cooperated with the Dharma cultivator and resisted with difficulty. This kind of thing should have been done by a physique cultivator. There was originally a physique cultivator in the team, but he died gloriously. Helpless, the ghost cultivator could only replace him. Lu Yi suddenly felt that this ghost cultivator looked familiar. After taking a closer look, he couldn't help but be stunned. Why was this guy here? Wasn't he supposed to be at Lone Mountain City? Lone Mountain City was tens of thousands of miles away from here, and this place was under the jurisdiction of Dark Moon Forest Pass. What he didn't know was that someone had requested to be transferred away from Lone Mountain City in order to get rid of his shadow. As for where he was transferred, it didn't matter, as long as it wasn't at Lone Mountain City. More than 2 years ago, when the war between Dark Moon Forest Pass and Shocking Waves Lake Pass broke out, Dark Moon Forest Pass needed a large number of reinforcements, so he was transferred here. The Great Genetic Age. Sure enough, after 2 years of comfortable days, he no longer had to be on tenterhooks at Lone Mountain City. Thanks to the insect disaster, his harvest in the past 2 years was not small. Now, his cultivation had reached the 6th order True Lake realm. Coupled with his extraordinary background and talent, he was at least somewhat famous in the Dark Moon Forest Pass, even if he could not summon the wind and rain. Wuxia finally stood up. It had been a long time since Lu Yi last saw an old friend. In addition, Lu Yi already had the intention to save him. This time, he no longer hesitated. The sword light beneath his feet trembled as he charged toward the battle. The spirit artifacts in Wuxia's hands flew as he struggled to fend off the attacks of the mantis bug. Even though it was a bug that did not have much intelligence, it was instinctive to fight and kill. It was as if it was born to be a swordsman with exquisite saber skills. The two mantis blades slashed at Wuxia from unimaginable angles, causing Wuxia to be flustered. Moreover, every strike was powerful and heavy. He had no choice but to abandon the usual combat methods used by ghost cultivators and face them head-on. If it weren't for the help of the spell cultivator and the fact that the insect race didn't know how to use the power of the spirit, they would have died long ago. The gap between the True Lake stage and the Spirit Sea stage was like a huge chasm. He hated anyone who used a saber, even if the other party was just a bug. No one who used a saber was good. He had already sent a message to his own pass master asking for help. However, it would take time for the pass master to arrive. He wasn't even sure if the pass master would come. Currently, the Dark Moon Forest Pass only had the pass master at the Spirit Sea realm. If the pass master did not come, then they would be doomed. But even if the pass master came, could they really hold on until then? As he thought about it, a huge force came from the front. Wuxia's arm went numb. He raised it high and opened it wide. In his field of vision, the mantis bug's blade flashed with a cold light as it stabbed downward. It was so fast that it left behind a series of afterimages. Wuxia's body went cold. He knew that his time of death had come. As a ghost cultivator, to be able to fight against a divine sea realm bug for so long was already a reflection of his strong foundation. But he could not hold on any longer. At the moment of life and death, he realized that he did not have the slightest bit of fear. He did not even have the thought of retreating. Cultivators of the 9 states, from the Spirit Stream realm onwards, lived in constant conflict between the two camps. In their lives, they had experienced countless big and small battles. None of them were afraid of death. It could be said that most cultivators could face their own death calmly. But even if he died, he had to die in a meaningful way. Following the thought in his heart, he pounced forward and shouted, "Go!" Even if he could only delay for a moment, he had to create a chance for his companions to escape. In his field of vision, a beam of light suddenly descended from the sky. Wuxia did not see clearly what it was, and he did not have time to look. He thrust the short blade in his hand forward and stabbed it directly into the mantis bug's hideous mouth. His spiritual power exploded, and the mouth exploded. This was the last attack of his life. Naturally, he used all his strength. But death did not come as expected. There was a cold feeling on the top of his head, and a wet feeling slid down his cheeks. The smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose. The mantis bug's sharp mantis blade was on top of his head, half an inch into his flesh. Just a little more and he would have been dead. Pain came from the top of his head. Wuxia gasped for breath. He did not know what was going on. He did not die. Not only did he not die, but he also killed this spirit ocean realm bug. In an instant, Wuxia's eyes were wet. He really did stand up, but in the next moment, a thin line of blood appeared on the forehead of the mantis bug in front of him. That line of blood quickly spread and went straight through the bug's entire body. With a crash, the mantis bug split open from the middle. The cut was neat and clean. Dark green blood drenched Wuxia's head and face. Wuxia blinked his eyes. It was not until then that he saw a figure standing not far away. Just now, this figure was blocked by the mantis bug. His first impression was that this guy was really handsome. With this kind of appearance, even if he did not have much cultivation, he would be able to attract girls with just a flick of his finger. Then, a sense of horror suddenly surged from the depths of his heart. He did not know where this sense of horror came from. Anyway, the moment he saw this stranger, his heart skipped a beat. He felt inexplicably uneasy. Instinctively, he felt that this was the aftereffect of escaping death. He hurriedly took a step back and looked at the newcomer warily. He was wearing a white robe and looked like an immortal. He had a handsome face and a big gourd hanging on his waist. No one could tell where he came from, but the spiritual energy around him showed that he was a spirit sea realm cultivator. Wuxia finally realized that he did not die. It was not that he was too powerful, but that he was saved. The light that he caught a glimpse of just now was obviously from this person's means. That should be a sword light. Only a powerhouse like that could kill a divine ocean realm insectoid so cleanly. Calming down, Wuxia cupped his fists. Dark Moon Forest Pass, Wuxia. Thank you for saving my life. May I know how to address you? For some reason, although he wanted to sincerely thank him, he felt a little uncomfortable. Moreover, the way this spirit ocean realm cultivator looked at him was a little strange. It seemed a little mischievous. Wuxia could not look him in the eye. After all, he was a spirit ocean realm cultivator. It was very impolite. Moreover, he had just saved his life. You're Li Taibai? Behind him, the spell cultivator looked as if he had seen a ghost. He looked at Lu Yi in shock. Back then, Lu Yi had disguised himself as Li Taibai and fought 6 rounds with the Grand Sky Alliance cultivators at the Shocking Waves Lake Pass. He won all 6 battles. In the last battle, he killed Tan Shu, whose cultivation was several levels higher than his. At that time, many cultivators at the Dark Moon Forest Pass saw him and were shocked. Later, some news came from the young Pass Lord Linyu. This Li Taibai was someone who could rival the Sect Destroyer Yi. The Sect Destroyer Yi was a ferocious person. When he was in the Spirit Stream realm, he had defeated the top sects of the Myriad Demon Ridge. When he was in the Cloud River realm, he had a terrifying battle record of killing 2,000 people in one battle. He was also ranked first in the Cloud River contest. His fame was so great that Lan Zi, who was ranked second, did not even have the thought of challenging him. He was in the limelight for a while. In the same era and in the same cultivation level, no one in the 9 prefectures could be compared to him. He was also seen as a tumor by the Myriad Demon Ridge and wanted to get rid of him. The Myriad Demon Ridge had finally produced Li Taibai, so they naturally wanted to spread the news. However, what made people sigh was that Tan Shu's death triggered a war between the 2 passes. The Shocking Waves Lake Pass Lord Lu Yueme personally dealt with Li Taibai. She bullied the weak with her status as a spirit ocean realm cultivator. In that battle, Li Taibai unfortunately died. When a legend fell, many Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators at the Dark Moon Forest Pass were indignant. However, he was already dead, so what was the use of being indignant? This spell cultivator was also present that day to witness Li Taibai's progress. The person who beheaded Tan Shu could be said to be extremely respectful towards him. However, he never expected that a person who had already died would appear in front of him again. Moreover, in a short 2 years, he had already reached the spirit ocean realm. He almost thought that he was dreaming. What? You are Li Taibai? Wuxia was also shocked. It had been 2 years since he came to the Dark Moon Forest Pass. Naturally, he had heard of Li Taibai's legendary deeds. Many people had told him about it before. He also felt that it was a pity. If the cultivators of the Dark Moon Forest Pass did not exaggerate, then Li Taibai really was someone who could contend with Lu Yi. It was a pity that he came too late and did not get to see Li Taibai's majesty. He never thought that he would be fated to meet him today. Unbelievable, unbelievable. According to his understanding, 2 years ago, Li Taibai was only a 3rd-order true lake realm cultivator. His cultivation was not much stronger than his own. In 2 years he was already a 6th-order true lake realm cultivator. His cultivation was improving at an incredible speed, but Li Taibai had actually reached the spirit ocean realm. What kind of great pill did he eat? Lu Yi was not surprised that someone recognized him. He only nodded slightly. It's me. When he activated the Thousand Faces spirit inscription, he also thought about changing his face to an unfamiliar face. However, the sword gourd symbol was too obvious, so he simply used Li Taibai's appearance. This place was under the jurisdiction of the Dark Moon Forest Pass, so it was normal for him to be recognized when encountering cultivators from the Dark Moon Forest Pass. Chapter 1054. Li Taibai's identity was recognized by Myriad Demon Ridge as a guard token, making it easier for him to act. Recognizing Lu Ye's identity, In Wu Ji's team of 3 bowed again. Many thanks for Sir's assistance. The 4th member of the team was seriously injured and unconscious and was being carried on the back of another person. Although they were shocked by Li Taibai's rapid improvement in cultivation, they were fortunate to have met a Spirit Sea Realm Master here, otherwise their fates would have been bleak. Lu Yi didn't comment. A Spirit Sea Realm Master should have the dignity of a Spirit Sea Realm Master. Turning his head to look in a certain direction, Lu Yi could vaguely sense a Spirit Sea Realm aura rapidly approaching, and judging from the fluctuations of this aura, it wasn't an ordinary Spirit Sea Realm Master. Feeling a sense of familiarity, Lu Yi roughly understood who this newcomer was. Presumably, In Wu Ji and the others had sent a message for help, causing the other party to rush here. Hesitating for a moment, Lu Yi didn't try to avoid them and instead stood in place calmly. If he tried to avoid them now, he would feel somewhat guilty. The newcomer soon arrived and the stream of light dissipated, revealing a graceful figure. It was the little pass master of Dark Moon Forest Pass, Lin Yu. After not seeing her for a few years, her cultivation had improved and she was now a 7th-order Divine Sea Realm Master. Even so, her face was filled with undisguised fatigue, and even her hair was a bit messy. Landing and sweeping her eyes around, she roughly understood what had happened and turned to look at Lu Yi in amazement. Li Taibai. She had a deep impression of this handsome young man in front of her. Back then, she even had the thought of accepting him into her sect. If it weren't for some accidents that happened later and destroyed this young man's future, she would be very happy to help her martial nephew and the other party get together. Unfortunately, in the battle at Shocking Waves Lake Pass to capture Dark Moon Forest Pass, although Li Taibai was lucky enough to survive, his soul had been injured by Lu Yueme, making it impossible for him to improve in this life. After that battle, she had hurriedly sent this young man away and announced that Li Taibai had died, mainly because she was afraid her martial nephew would continue to pester her. Every time she thought of this person afterwards, she felt extremely regretful. But the cultivation world was like this. Since ancient times, many talented cultivators had made a name for themselves at a young age, but if they couldn't reach the end, their achievements would only be short-lived. The 9 provinces was vast and there were many geniuses. Geniuses who couldn't grow were useless. Lin Yu hadn't expected to meet this young man again after so many years. Forest Pass Lord, long time no see. Lu Yi smiled lightly. When he was a 3rd-order True Lake Realm cultivator facing off against Lin Yu, a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator, the pressure he felt was quite great, but now that he saw her again, it was no longer a big deal. Lin Yu stared at Lu Yi in disbelief. We have reached the Divine Sea level? I encountered a fortuitous encounter and gained some benefits, so I was lucky enough to advance. Lu Yi casually spouted nonsense. There were many opportunities in the land of the 9 prefectures. Just because he couldn't encounter it didn't mean that others couldn't. Lin Yu had sent Li Taibai away because his spirit was injured and his future was hopeless. However, there was no such thing as a dead end in this world. Looking at it now, Li Taibai had survived a hopeless situation. He must be blessed with great luck. Otherwise, how could a mere independent cultivator have such an opportunity? A small secret realm? Lin Yu immediately connected the dots. They hadn't seen Li Taibai for several years, and now he had suddenly appeared as a Divine Sea cultivator. In addition, he had also mentioned a lucky chance. This could only be explained by a small mystic realm. Lu Yi smiled but said nothing. Lin Yu also knew that she had misspoken. This kind of thing was not easy to pry into. Even if her cultivation was higher than Lu Ye's, who didn't have their own secrets? It was just that she was too shocked and overworked recently, so she spoke without thinking. Li Taibai didn't answer. It was reasonable, and she wouldn't blame him. "Where are you going?" Lin Yu asked again. Lu Yi said, "I've just come out of seclusion not too long ago and I'm preparing to travel around. Senior should know that I've just stepped into the Divine Sea realm, so my mental state and cultivation are still lacking. It's time for me to broaden my horizons." What he said was the truth, but Lin Yu shook her head. If it was in the past, there wouldn't be a problem. However, there have been great changes in the 9 prefectures in the past 2 years. I'm afraid it's not suitable for me to travel anymore. Great change? Lu Yi revealed a puzzled expression. Is it related to the insect race? I saw the desert plains desolate with the insect race running rampant. What's going on here? Lin Yu sighed. Calamities and tribulations from the heavens cannot be stopped by humans. His expression was filled with exhaustion. He changed the topic and said, "What's the matter?" "Providing you with the great god Momos, the great sage of human Tao." Chapter 1054, War-Free Reading. Yes. The fastest to update the latest chapter. Are you willing to follow me to the Dark Moon Forest Pass? For the past 2 years, she had been overseeing the Dark Moon Forest Pass alone. She had repeatedly sent messages to the 10,000 Demon City, requesting for help. However, the 9 prefectures were currently plagued by insect disasters, and the Divine Sea Realm cultivators of the 10,000 Demon Ridge were all on missions. They were already short on manpower, so how could they spare any extra manpower for her? It wasn't just the 10,000 Demon Ridge that was like this, Grand Heaven Alliance was the same. If not for this, how could she, a dignified 7th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivator, be so tired? If she could capture Li Taibai and bring him to the Dark Moon Forest Pass, he would definitely be able to share her burden. She could understand that the 10,000 Demon City had rejected her request for manpower. It shouldn't be a problem for her to capture a strong man herself, right? And no matter what, Li Taibai had some connections with the Dark Moon Forest Pass, so he was in a favorable position. How could Lu Yi be willing to go to the Dark Moon Forest Pass with her? He had just returned from the blood refining world and was about to return to Grand Sky City, so he didn't want to complicate matters. Just as he was about to refuse, Lin Yu saw through his thoughts. She raised her hand and grabbed the guard order at her waist. Dark Moon Forest Pass Master Lin Yu, conscripting rogue cultivator Li Taibai to assist in guarding the pass. Once the order is given, no disobedience is allowed. She wanted to use her military rank and position to pressure him. Lu Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had disguised himself as Li Taibai just to take advantage of this identity. As long as he passed through Li Yuan and crossed the 10,000 Demon Ridges territory, he could restore his original appearance. But now, this problem had arisen. Under the guard order, Li Taibai had no room to refuse. Of course, as Lu Yi, he could also try to kill all these people in front of him and end this once and for all. If it was the previous Lu Yi, he might have thought of this. As for whether he could kill them or not, he would have to fight first. At worst, he would just expose Li Taibai's background and his ability to disguise himself as a 10,000 Demon Ridge cultivator. There was no real loss. But now, he had more considerations than before. So, after pondering for a moment, he cupped his fists and said, "Li Taibai accepts the order." Dark Moon Forest Pass could not restrain him. If he really wanted to leave, he was not in a hurry, so there was no need to start a conflict here. Lin Yu smiled. "Very good. Then, from now on, you are the young pass master of my Dark Moon Forest Pass." Lu Yi did not expect that he would be entrusted with such an important task after being recruited. Puzzled, he asked, "Isn't the young pass master of Dark Moon Forest Pass senior?" "Senior, did you get promoted? Where is the original Great Pass Master?" He remembered that the original Great Pass Master was called Jianghu. In terms of cultivation, he was a minor realm higher than Lin Yu. "You are already at the Divine Sea Realm, so there is no need to call me senior. Cultivators like us are ranked by our cultivation. If you don't mind, you can call me senior sister. It will make me look younger." Lin Yu was undoubtedly optimistic about Lu Yi. Imagine a rogue cultivator, without a sect or master, who could kill a 7th Order master when he was only at the 3rd Order True Lake Realm. In just 2 years, he had reached the Divine Sea Realm. How could an ordinary person compare to such potential? And now was the time for her to recruit people. Naturally, she would try her best to rope in Lu Yi. Senior Sister Lin. Lu Yi readily accepted her advice. You don't understand the current situation of the 9 states. Now, we need divine sea realm cultivators everywhere. Senior brother Jianghu has been transferred away, so there is only one divine sea realm cultivator in Dark Moon Forest Pass. It is not a promotion, just a supplement. Lu Yi understood. Let's return to the pass first. I will explain it to you on the way, Lin Yu said. While the two of them were talking, Ing Wuji's team stood quietly at the side. Only Ing Wuji moved to remove the mantis race's 2 mantis blades and place them on his shoulders. He looked very majestic. Seeing Lu Yi look at him, Ing Wuji explained, "This thing is tough and sharp. It is suitable for artifact refining." Although the insect plague caused the 9 states to lose a lot, it also contributed a lot of precious materials. Take this mantis blade for example. It was extremely tough and sharp. It was an excellent material for artifact refining. That was why cultivators could not only obtain battle merits by killing the insect race, but they could also collect many rare and strange materials. These things could be sold to the Tianji treasure vault for a good profit. Lu Yi nodded. Ing Wuji continued, "Also, I do not like things like blades. I hate people who use blades the most. Little Pass Lord, you are a sword cultivator. You should know that I will provide you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's The Great Sage of Human Tao. Chapter 1054, Great Sage Free Reading, Great Sage. The fastest to update the latest chapter. Blades are not good people. They are a bunch of boorish people. They are not as elegant as sword cultivators. In the 9 states, those who used blades looked down on those who used swords, and those who used swords looked down on those who used blades. It was no secret that the two hated each other. Li Taibai was his savior and seemed to be a sword cultivator. Naturally, Ing Wuji had to find something he liked to hear. In the future, he would be the Little Pass Lord of Dark Moon Forest Pass. He would have to listen to his orders. Lu Yi narrowed his eyes and nodded. That makes sense. You are not bad. I have high hopes for you. Although it was a compliment, Ing Wuji felt that something was not quite right. For some reason, he felt goosebumps all over his body. Let's go. Lin Yu was in a good mood. Although she did not have time to save people on this trip. Now that she had recruited Li Taibai to help her, she would not have to work so hard in the future. In fact, if it were not for Ing Wuji in this group, she would not have rushed here. Cultivators outside were dependent on their own fortune and misfortune. How could they always have a senior to take care of them? If that was the case, cultivators would not be able to grow. However, Ing Wuji was from Sanluo Hall. She had to take him seriously. After receiving the request for help, she immediately rushed over. Channeling her spirit energy, the group flew towards Dark Moon Forest Pass under Lin Yu's lead. Lu Yi and Lin Yu flew at the front. Ing Wuji and the others followed closely behind. Along the way, Lin Yu told them about the current situation in the 9 states. It was roughly the same as the information Lu Yi got from Yi, but more detailed. To be continued. To see the latest chapter of The Great Sage of Human Tao, please enter it in your browser. To provide you with the latest chapter of Great God Momo's The Great Sage of Human Tao. Chapter 1054, Great Sage Free Reading, Great Sage. Chapter 1055. Yi naturally wouldn't hide anything from Lu Yi, but her cultivation was not enough, so she didn't have access to as many things as Lin Yu. According to Lin Yu's description, the situation in the 9 regions was more serious than Lu Yi imagined. It was so serious that the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Myriad Demon Ridge had tacitly suspended their disputes and dealt with the mess in their hands. This was the first time since the beginning of the world. Ever since the 2 camps had been established, the conflict between them had never stopped. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, in the Cloud River battlefield, and in the 9 states, there had been endless conflict. However, because of the spread of the insect plague, the 2 camps had been forced to make some changes. But what made people feel desperate was that this situation had been going on for 2 years, and they didn't know how long it would last. The insects that emerged from the depths of the ground were endless, And the cultivators still didn't have the ability to go deep into the ground to destroy the insect nest. If the source of the insect nest was not solved, the insect problem would always exist. This was a dead end. The most urgent problem for the powerhouses of the two camps now was how to safely go deep into the ground. As long as this problem was solved, the insect disaster would be eliminated. When the group arrived at the Dark Moon Forest Pass, Lu Yi keenly noticed that the number of cultivators stationed here had greatly decreased. It was less than 10% of the total number when he came here last time. Although some cultivators were now killing insects to earn merit, the numbers shouldn't be so small. This situation was not caused by casualties, but because most of the cultivators had been transferred away, just like the reason why Jianghu was transferred away. After all, this was the front line of the confrontation between the two camps. There was nothing else except for the mountain passes. Even if the insect race attacked and occupied this place, there was no real loss. Unlike the hinterland of the two camps, there were many cities and gathering places of mortals that needed to be guarded. However, this was the front line after all, and they couldn't abandon it, so they still needed some cultivators to stay here. As for the cultivators who were transferred away, most of them were sent to positions that needed cultivators to guard. The number of cultivators in the 9 regions was huge, but in the face of this insect disaster that swept across the entire continent, the manpower was still tight. Wuxia and the others left and took their seriously injured companion to find a medical practitioner to treat him. Lin Yu led Lu Yi to a hall and walked inside. This was senior brother Zhang Kuan's original residence. After he left, this place has been empty. You can live here in the future. Lu Yi had no objections. It's your first time here, so you should rest first. I will request the 10,000 Demons City to promote you to the Little Pass Lord of the Dark Moon Forest Pass. Before the official appointment is made, you don't need to do anything. However, right now, all sides are in need of manpower, so it won't take long. You should be mentally prepared. Lin Yu quickly left in a good mood. Recently, she had been really tired. This time, she had caught a Divine Sea Realm cultivator from her side in the wild, and although he was only a first-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator, he could at least share some of her burden. After sending Lin Yu off, Lu Yi went to a nearby sleeping chamber and sat down cross-legged. Being pulled in by Lin Yu didn't have much of an impact on him. It was just a delay of a few days. 2 years had passed, so why would he care about a few days? Moreover, Li Taibai's identity could withstand scrutiny. Back then, he had disguised himself as Li Taibai and had not been seen through by the myriad Demon Ridge. Now that the situation in the 9 prefectures was so chaotic, it was even more impossible for him to be exposed. He could take this opportunity to nail a nail into the myriad Demon Ridge. Last time, when Lu Yi disguised himself as Li Taibai, he had considered this, but at that time, his cultivation was insufficient, so he gave up on this idea. Now that he was a Divine Sea Realm cultivator, and with this opportunity, Lin Yu was in urgent need of manpower, so everything was logical. It wasn't that he wanted to do anything unspeakable to the myriad Demon Ridge. He couldn't shake the foundation of such a large camp by himself, so he didn't have the ability to do so. It was just a simple matter of taking advantage of the situation. Perhaps doing so would be meaningless, or perhaps it would play a crucial role in the future. It was just a chess piece within the scope of his ability. The only troublesome person in the Dark Moon Forest Pass was Tong Shuyao. Lu Yi remembered that this senior sister was extremely concerned about Li Taibai. After the last battle, Tong Shuyao was seriously injured and fell into a coma. Lin Yu announced that Li Taibai had died in battle, so she wanted to cut off Tong Shuyao's thoughts. Now that he had come back from the dead, he didn't know if Tong Shuyao would still bother him. But then again, Tong Shuyao might not be here. A large number of cultivators in the Dark Moon Forest Pass were transferred away, and Tong Shuyao might have been transferred away too, so she might not be here. After thinking for a while, Lu Yi got up and walked out of his sleeping quarters, heading straight for the Tianji Hall. He had been to the Tianji Hall in the Dark Moon Forest Pass before, so he was very familiar with the place. There were tens of cultivators in the hall, all of them were either buying or selling the Tianji pillar. Lu Yi found a familiar figure among them. It was Wuxia. Beside him was his magic cultivator companion. During this trip, they had gained quite a lot. Without mentioning other things, the materials they collected from the insects could be sold to the Tianji treasure house for merit points. A true lake-stage cultivator's cultivation required a large amount of merit points, so to a cultivator, merit points and battle merits were equally important. Of course, in terms of value, battle merits were undoubtedly more valuable. The Tianji pillar was filled with people, and there was no place to stand. Lu Yi lined up not far behind Wuxia and waited quietly. Looking at Wuxia, Lu Yi suddenly realized a problem. With his cultivation speed, the gap between him and his peers would only grow bigger and bigger. Before his talent tree completed its transformation, his cultivation speed was quite fast, but it was not as exaggerated as it was now. But after his talent tree completed its transformation and gained the ability to devour, his cultivation speed became abnormal. His current first-order Divine Sea Realm cultivation was the result of him deliberately suppressing it. If he did not suppress it, his cultivation would definitely be higher. This meant that his companions and even enemies who could walk side by side with him in the past would soon be left behind. Wuxia was like this, but Xiao Xinghe, Li Baxian, and the others were also like this. This made Lu Yi feel a little melancholy. He originally wanted to tease Wuxia, but now he was no longer in the mood. Wuxia quickly finished his transaction and revealed a look of joy. The harvest this time was quite good, enough to support his cultivation for a while. When he turned around, he was startled and hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, sir." Lu Yi nodded softly and stepped forward with the demeanor of a Divine Sea Realm master, raising his hand and placing it on the Tianji pillar. Wuxia held his breath and quickly walked away. He didn't know why, but every time he saw this Li Tai Bai, he felt an inexplicable sense of pressure. He was sure that he had never seen this person before, and it was impossible for him to have any relationship with him, but that inexplicable sense of pressure was real. Although he didn't understand, Wuxia still secretly warned himself to stay as far away from this person as possible in the future. Cultivators followed their hearts, and it had to be said that as a ghost cultivator, Wuxia had a very strong sense of potential danger. At the same time, somewhere in Thunder Province, a graceful figure flew through the air as a Divine Sea Realm insect flew towards her, its mandibles wriggling as it released a fierce aura. When the graceful figure brushed past it, the insect suddenly stiffened, and it wasn't until the graceful figure flew 1,000 meters away that it suddenly burst into a bloody mist. She continued forward, and in her boredom, she habitually checked her battlefield mark. In the past 2 years, this was what she had done the most. It wasn't that she was bored, but rather that she was using her battlefield mark to check whether someone was alive or not. Originally, she thought that this time would be the same as before, and there wouldn't be any changes to the battlefield mark, but after a glance, the woman suddenly froze and hurriedly stopped. The battlefield mark that hadn't changed for 2 years had actually changed, and it was now in a state where it could be contacted. In other words, that person had returned to the 9 provinces. This was really strange. Since the small secret realm collapsed 2 years ago, that person had disappeared, and the battlefield mark had been in a state where it couldn't be contacted. The High Lord guessed that he should have gone to another small secret realm. However, she couldn't figure out what kind of secret realm could trap a person for 2 years. But no matter what, this was good news for her and the High Lord, because this person was someone that the High Lord thought highly of. It could be said that he was the best person to do something big. In the entire 9 provinces, besides him, no one else could do it, including the omnipotent High Lord. She hurriedly sent a message to the High Lord. "Lu Yi has returned to the 9 provinces." After a few breaths, the High Lord replied, "Bring him here." Yu Daiwei stuck out her scarlet tongue, licked her lips, and said softly, "Little thing, don't even think about it this time." Last time, when she trapped him in the small secret realm and left Dao 13 to guard it, she thought that nothing would go wrong. But the High Lord thought that he had a way to escape, because he was a person with great luck and could do things that ordinary people couldn't. Yu Daiwei thought that if she was in his situation, she would have no other choice but to die of old age in the small secret realm. She had also checked on that kid's situation once in a while, wanting to see what tricks he could play. But she didn't find any clues until one day, when she wanted to check on the situation again, she was surprised to find that the small secret realm where that kid was placed had collapsed. She couldn't believe it. She knew that the collapse of the small secret realm must have something to do with that kid, but she really couldn't understand how he did it. Although she didn't stay in the small secret realm all the time, she checked frequently and didn't find anything suspicious at all. Just as the High Lord said, a person with such great luck always had things that ordinary people couldn't do. The small secret realm had collapsed, the person had disappeared, and the battlefield mark had been in a state where it couldn't be contacted. After 2 years, that kid had finally returned. Compared to carrying out the mission given by the High Lord, she was more interested in knowing how he made the small secret realm disappear and where he had been for the past 2 years. A woman's curiosity was extremely strong. Fortunately, these two things didn't conflict. If she wanted to catch him, she had to determine his location first. Fortunately, it wasn't difficult to do this in the 9 provinces. Chapter 1056. With a flip of her hand, a tracking disc appeared in her palm. She bit her fingertip and wrote Lu Yi's name on the disc. The needle spun and pointed in a certain direction. That direction was where the Force province was located. Tracking discs were rare, but they were not impossible to obtain. Many top sects in the 9 regions had backup tracking discs. The one in Yu Daiwei's hand was given to her by the Great Lord. If not for the fact that she wanted to catch that brat as soon as possible, she would not use it. It was normal for it to point in the direction of the Force province. Lu Yi was from the Force province. Since he had returned to the 9 regions from a small sealed world, he must be heading to the Force province. She did not think that this mission would be too difficult. Now that the world was in chaos and cultivators were scattered everywhere, it would be easy for her to capture a true Lake Realm cultivator. She had done this once before. Yu Daiwei urged her spirit energy and rushed toward the Force province. With her 8th order Divine Sea Realm cultivation, her speed was very fast. At this time, on a spirit peak, Tai Shan stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the clouds below. Even someone as powerful as him was caught off guard by the various changes in the 9 regions in the past 2 years. The sudden outbreak of the insect plague forced him to change many of his plans. However, the true core of the plan was something that couldn't be changed. The outbreak of the insect plague was a crisis for the 9 regions. If it were not for the large number of cultivators in the 9 regions, the entire world would have been plunged into misery and suffering. But for him, it was an opportunity. A great opportunity to win people's hearts. The current 9 prefectures had been plagued by the insect plague for 2 years. Not to mention the mortals, even the cultivators were extremely distressed. If at this juncture, a person or a force stood out and resolved the insect plague, they would definitely gain great prestige. He wanted to create a 3rd camp outside of the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Myriad Demon Ridge. He wanted to eliminate the conflict between the 2 camps that had lasted for countless years. He needed to have the courage and strength to break the current situation. He had the courage, but he lacked the strength. But it was not a big deal. The key was the opportunity. The outbreak of the insect plague in the 9 regions had indeed disrupted his original plan, but it also presented him with a great opportunity. However, before he could carry out this plan, he would need the assistance of another person. That was because only that person would have the ability to use that miraculous item and obtain the permission of Heaven's secrets to create the 3rd faction. Last time, he wasn't qualified because the time wasn't right. But now, the time had come. There was no need to probe. Tai Shan knew that this person was qualified to use that mystical item. This was a mysterious feeling. At his level of cultivation, most of the time, feelings were the truth. As long as they brought him over, they could borrow his strength to create chaos. Then, they could use chaos as the capital to solve the insect disaster in the 9 regions. Then, chaos would have the qualifications to establish itself. Jianghu believed that the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Myriad Devil Ridge wouldn't be so despicable as to burn the bridge after crossing the river. The establishment of chaos was only the first step. There were too many cultivators in this world who had long been tired of the endless confrontation between the 2 camps. Once the name of chaos was made known, And there was also the great merit of solving the insect plague. There would be no need to fear that no one would join them. At that time, as long as they slowly nibbled away at the foundation of the two camps, they could gradually change the structure of the 9 regions. This was not something that could be done in a short period of time. This was a grand plan that would take hundreds of years. Tai Shan was ambitious and had long been used to waiting. In the Tianji Hall of the Dark Moon Forest Pass, Lu Yi spent a large amount of merit points to exchange for some spirit stones and spirit pills. These cultivation resources weren't of much use to him. At most, they would be used to recover after a big battle. However, after his experience in the blood refinement realm, Lu Yi knew that it was better to prepare more of these things. Who knew when they would be useful? Other than that, he also bought many spirit tools and magic tools for the sword gourd to devour. There wasn't much sword chi left in the sword gourd. He was now Li Tai Bai. If he wanted to use the methods of a sword cultivator, the sword gourd would be the thing he relied on the most. Out of the nearly 1 million merit points, only 100,000 were left. The rest were squandered in a short period of time. Then, Lu Yi contacted the War Merit Pavilion. Soon he stood in front of the heavy door. The gold and silver flood dragons immediately woke up. The silver flood dragon poked its head out of the door and eagerly asked, "Little fellow, how come you haven't come to see us in such a long time? Did you forget about us?" In these 2 years, the 2 flood dragons had been waiting anxiously. It wasn't that they coveted the food that Lu Yi brought, but that they had waited so long for someone to come. They didn't want him to die early. After not seeing Lu Yi for 2 years, the 2 flood dragons thought that he had encountered some misfortune. Now that Lu Yi had finally appeared, the silver flood dragon was naturally happy. Even the gold flood dragon, who had always been relatively calm, had a concerned look in its eyes. Lu Yi smiled. "How could I forget 2 seniors? I was trapped for a long time and couldn't escape. As soon as I escaped, I came to see you too. At least you have a conscience." The silver flood dragon relaxed. However, the gold flood dragon felt that something was wrong. "What kind of powerful enemy did you encounter? How come the method we left in your divine sea was broken?" "You can say that." Lu Yi was too lazy to explain. The gold flood dragon was shocked again. "You broke through to the divine sea realm. How long had it been?" The last time Lu Yi came here, he was only a 5th-order true lake realm cultivator. Although it knew that Lu Yi was someone who had been guided by heaven's will, the speed at which his cultivation rose was simply too terrifying. Lu Yi took out the beast meat he had just bought from his storage bag and threw it to the 2 flood dragons. The silver flood dragon immediately ate it in big mouthfuls. Delicious, really delicious. 100. It always looked like a hungry ghost reincarnated. In comparison, the gold flood dragon was undoubtedly much more stable. "You 2 eat first, I'll go in and take a look." Lu Yi smiled slightly and didn't mention that he had the 2 flood dragons leave the twin dragon sea barrier in his divine sea. There was no need for that anymore. Before he broke through to the divine sea realm, although he was lucky enough to give birth to a soul body and his divine sense, he was still not a true divine sea realm cultivator. The method the 2 flood dragons gave him could more effectively resist some divine sense attacks from divine sea realm cultivators. But now that he had broken through to the divine sea realm, he didn't need to use external methods. What's more, he had the soul-suppressing tower in his divine sea, so he didn't need to worry about ordinary divine sense attacks. Pushing open the door, Lu Yi walked into the war service pavilion. He didn't need anything special for this trip. First, he spent 30,000 battle points to replenish the God-vanquishing sword. In the blood-refining world, the God-vanquishing sword was of great help. Without it, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to tear through Dao 13's soul defense and plant the soul manipulation divine rune on him. In that environment, his cultivation would be suppressed and he would likely encounter some dangers that he couldn't resist. At the very least, in the early days of the blood-refining world, Dao 13's existence resolved a lot of unnecessary troubles for him and made it easier for him to act. Now that he had broken through to the Divine Sea Realm, he would have to fight against Divine Sea Realm cultivators in the future. The God-vanquishing sword became even more important. But even though it was powerful, it was a one-time use treasure. After using it, he would have to return to the war service pavilion to replenish it, which was quite troublesome. He had spent more than 1,000,000 battle points, but he had only spent 30,000 battle points, which wasn't even a fraction, so Lu Yi prepared to exchange for some golden spirit sticks. Thanks to the blessings of the old seniors of the blood refining world, Lu Ye's first order divine sea realm cultivation had already been consolidated, so he planned to raise his cultivation once more. Of course, there was no need to rush this matter and he would just let nature take its course. However, before Lu Yi could exchange for a golden spirit stick, he keenly noticed that the number of stone platforms in the war service pavilion had changed. He had entered and exited the war service pavilion many times, so although he hadn't counted the number of stone platforms, he could still clearly see their arrangement at a glance. At this moment, there were some stone platforms that hadn't been there before. This wasn't the first time this had happened. With the improvement of Lu Ye's cultivation, there would often be new things in the war service pavilion that he had never seen before, all of which were precious treasures. Lu Yi basically just looked around and didn't have any thoughts about it. First of all, although it was easy for him to obtain battle points, the consumption was also great. The rapid improvement of his strength was a result of a large number of battle points. Secondly, although these treasures were precious, they were ultimately just external objects. Relatively speaking, Lu Yi was more willing to exchange for a golden spirit stick to improve his cultivation. It was normal for cultivators to rely on external forces, but they couldn't rely too much on them. Therefore, apart from the mountain coiling saber, he only had the Scarlet Dragon battle clothes. The original intention of exchanging for the Scarlet Dragon battle clothes was also to consider the expansion of his body in beast form. Without this consideration, he wouldn't have even exchanged for the Scarlet Dragon battle clothes. Although he didn't want to exchange for anything, there was no problem with looking around. He could consider it as broadening his horizons. If someone used these things in front of him in the future, he would at least know what they were used for and be able to deal with them. Walking up to the stone platforms, Yang Kai looked at one of them and raised his brow. Because what was placed on the stone platform was actually a saber. The style was ordinary, just like a machete that could be seen everywhere in the mortal world. Seeing such a thing, Lu Yi instantly lost interest. It was undeniable that a saber that could be placed here was of high quality. In terms of quality, it was much better than the mountain coiling saber. Perhaps it could reach the level of a spirit treasure. However, Lu Yi was used to using the mountain coiling saber and had long been connected to it. With a saber in hand, he could display his full strength. But if he exchanged for an unfamiliar saber, even if it was of a higher quality, even if it was exactly the same as the mountain coiling saber, it would be useless if he didn't feel comfortable using it. In the War Merit Pavilion, there were several saber-type treasures that were better than the mountain coiling saber. If Lu Yi wanted to exchange for one, he would have done so long ago. Why would he wait until today? Therefore, seeing that it was a saber, Lu Yi didn't want to continue looking. But before he could shift his gaze away, the saber suddenly squirmed and changed, directly turning into a pitch-black liquid. It wasn't liquid and looked much more condensed than liquid, as if some kind of metal had been melted. The liquid continued to squirm and change, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into the shape of another saber. Lu Yi was greatly surprised. After staring at it for a while, he found that this thing was constantly changing shape, but no matter how it changed, it was still in the shape of a saber. Only then did Lu Yi become interested and investigate the specific information of this thing. The boys' small circle of booksellers hadn't read in VX for half a year, and they had reopened the VIP section. In the end, they still had to pay for every chapter. This painful training was a little bit of cover. 13 discussions find an old book. I remember reading one. 2,000 chapters of the super long book of cultivation. The protagonist did missions in various worlds. No. Chapter 1057. Every stone platform had a layer of restriction. Without breaking the restriction, it was impossible to take away the items on the platforms. The way to break the restriction was simple. You just had to spend the corresponding amount of battle points. In the War Merit Pavilion, you didn't have to fight with strength. Battle points were the best pass. However, Just checking the properties and functions of the treasures on the platforms didn't require any battle points. Lu Yi pressed his hand on the restriction on the stone platform and immersed himself in his thoughts. Soon he understood. Soul Cutter, this thing was a soul tool that could be stored in the Spirit Sea. If there was a battle between spirits, it could be used to kill the enemy. Before reaching the Spirit Sea realm, cultivators had many ways to fight. However, it was still a contest of physical strength. All attacks and spells were driven by spiritual power. However, at the Spirit Sea realm, it was a battle between spirits. Battles between Spirit Sea realm cultivators were often divided into two sides. The visible battle was a contest of Spirit Sea realm cultivators, while the invisible battle was a contest of Spirit Sea realm cultivators. The contest of Spirit Sea realm cultivators had a great impact on the battle. It could be said that the side with the stronger Spirit Sea usually had the upper hand in a battle. Of course, unless the difference in strength was too great, it wasn't easy to defeat the opponent's Spirit Sea in a battle. In the past, Lu Yi didn't need to understand this. Before reaching the Spirit Sea realm, it was useless. However, now that he was a Spirit Sea realm cultivator, it was time for him to understand this. The appearance of the Soul Cutter was a pleasant surprise. It seemed that the War Merit Pavilion had also noticed his increase in Spirit Sea realm. That was why they had such an item. In terms of spirits, he had the Soul Pagoda, which could protect his Spirit Sea realm. However, this was only a passive defense. His Spirit Sea realm attack was still lacking. In fact, he also had offensive methods. Whether it was spirit seduction or spirit manipulation, they could be considered offensive methods. However, when fighting against Spirit Sea realm cultivators, he couldn't use spirit seduction or spirit manipulation. It was unrealistic. Not only would he fail to injure the enemy, he would also be a laughingstock. However, he could use his Spirit Sea realm to attack. Just like what the trader of the Immortal Dawn Mountain, Jianghu, did. At that time, the Spirit Sea realm cultivator spirits were shaken and they fell into the lake. However, that was only because the difference in Spirit Sea realm cultivators was too great. If their cultivations were similar, the enemy would be able to easily block such a simple and direct divine soul attack. Only by turning one's own spiritual power into an effective attack could it be considered a spiritual attack. If Jianghu had mastered a real spiritual attack that day, the A3 team would have lost their ability to fight in an instant. Spiritual power was like an unsharpened weapon. Mastering the means of spiritual attack was like sharpening the weapon. The destructive power it could unleash was incomparable. Therefore, every Spirit Sea realm cultivator would cultivate some soul secret arts, either for attack or defense. This was the general trend. Others had them, but you didn't. Naturally, you would be at a disadvantage in a fight. In addition, he could also use soul tools, such as the soul-severing saber in front of him, which would save him a lot of time and effort to cultivate soul techniques. However, soul tools were very rare and could not be refined casually. There were many Spirit Sea realm cultivators in the 9 continents, but how many of them had soul tools? Probably less than 5% of them. From this, one could see how precious soul items were. If this was just a saber, even if it was a spiritual treasure, Lu Yi wouldn't be tempted. However, since it was a soul tool, it was different. Lu Yi didn't rush to exchange for the soul-severing saber. He looked at the other stone platforms. Without exception, they were all soul tools with both offensive and defensive capabilities. He was dazzled by them. It had to be said that all of the items on the stone platforms were of excellent quality. Lu Yi wanted them all, but he knew that soul armaments were more important than quantity. For now, he had the Soul Shackle Pagoda, which was more than enough for defense. What he lacked right now was an offensive weapon. After a while, he came to the soul-severing saber again. He chose it not only because it was in the shape of a saber. More importantly, it was not a normal soul tool. Normal soul tools could only be stored in the Spirit Sea. They were neither real nor illusory. However, the soul-severing saber in front of him was different. It could be dissolved in material objects. For example, the Pan Mountain saber. It didn't have a fixed shape to begin with. It could change between different types of sabers. Therefore, it had no problem fusing with the mountain plate saber. It was equivalent to adding a power to the mountain plate saber that could injure the soul. If he used the mountain plate saber to attack an enemy, it would cause an impact to the enemy's soul. It was a little difficult to guard against. Just think about it. When fighting with an enemy, a flesh wound would become a soul wound. How frightening would that be? In a fierce battle, a momentary loss could mean death. Lu Yi checked the price of the soul-severing saber. In the next moment, his face darkened. 500,000 battle merits. It didn't make sense. The Soul Pagoda was only 188,888 battle merits. How could the soul-severing saber cost 500,000 battle merits? They were both soul tools. Even if there was a difference in quality, it shouldn't be so big. So far, the most expensive item in the War Merit Pavilion was the Golden Body Medallion. It cost 300,000 battle merits. However, it was used to protect one's life. There was a reason why it was so expensive. Why was the soul-severing saber so expensive? He checked the prices of the other soul tools. They were about the same as the Soul Pagoda, or even less. Why was it that the one he wanted was so ridiculously expensive? Lu Yi seriously suspected that the War Merit Pavilion was a place where one looked at the dish. He had just received a large amount of battle merits from Tianji and gathered 1,000,000 battle merits. Now, an item that cost 500,000 battle merits had appeared, and it was the one he wanted. Tianji's left hand went out and his right hand went in. Lu Yi was a bit angry, but there was no way to argue with him. He could only clench his teeth and exchange for the soul-severing saber. He didn't look at the other soul tools. He didn't need them, and if he continued, he would lose all his battle merits. He went to the stone table with the golden lots and exchanged for 10 of them. Only then did he leave the War Merit Pavilion. The silver worm enthusiastically called out, "Come again next time." "I won't be coming again," replied Lu Yi angrily. What a profiteer! The silver worm was completely baffled. He had no idea what was going on. After leaving Tianji Hall and returning to his residence, Lu Yi took out the mountain plate saber and placed it on his lap. He calmed his mind and brushed his hand across the blade. Wherever his hand passed, a pitch-black liquid would appear out of nowhere and slowly wrap around the mountain plate saber. A moment later, the soul-severing saber had completely wrapped around the mountain plate saber. Just as he had imagined, it had transformed into a saber robe for the mountain plate saber. From the outside, he couldn't see any difference. That was because the soul-severing saber was also black, which perfectly matched the mountain plate saber. Weighing it in his hand, the mountain plate saber seemed to have become much heavier. But that was a good thing for him. Now that his cultivation had increased by a large realm, the previous weight wasn't very suitable. Although the current weight was a bit heavier, it was still manageable. Just as he was about to investigate the mountain plate saber's power, the saber robe suddenly changed. Lu Yi could clearly sense that the saber robe was rapidly fusing into the mountain plate saber. It had completely disappeared in the blink of an eye. This change stunned him. For a moment, he didn't know what was going on. But in the next moment, a heart-wrenching scene occurred. The restrictions within the Pan Mountain Saber were being destroyed at an extremely fast speed. The quality of a spirit or magic tool depended entirely on the number of restrictions. The more restrictions there were, the higher the quality. The Mountain Pan Saber had been upgraded several times and was now a long saber at the magic tool level. Naturally, there were a lot of restrictions placed on it. Logically speaking, unless the saber was damaged or broken, the restrictions placed on it should not be broken. But this was happening right under Lu Ye's nose. The soul-severing saber clearly had the ability to dissolve restrictions. When Lu Yi was looking for the introduction of the soul-severing saber in the War Merit Pavilion, he didn't see this. Of course, the introductions of treasures in the War Merit Pavilion were rather general and not particularly detailed. For example, the introduction of the soul-suppressing pagoda only had one sentence: guard the Spirit Sea. As for how it guarded the Spirit Sea and how effective it was up to the user to observe it carefully. Cultivators weren't children. They had their own judgments. There were many things that didn't need to be so detailed. But this time, the situation was different. The restrictions within the mountain plate saber were rapidly disappearing, and the saber's quality was rapidly falling. Lu Yi wanted to stop it. He hurriedly poured his spiritual energy into the saber, but to no avail. He could only watch as the saber that had accompanied him for so long fell from magic tool to supreme grade spirit tool, then high grade, mid grade, low grade. In the end, it turned into a saber without any restrictions. The veins on Lu Ye's forehead throbbed. The soul-severing saber was so expensive. If it could really be used as it should be, then so be it. After all, it was meant to be used against enemies. But this thing hadn't even done anything yet. It was a bit excessive to destroy his mountain plate saber. Of course, it wasn't exactly correct to say that it was destroyed. The mountain plate saber was still there, and it hadn't suffered any substantial damage. As long as it was reforged, it could still be restored to its original quality. Lu Yi could barely do this himself. He didn't need the help of others. But it required a lot of time, effort, and some special refining materials. The construction of each restriction required different materials. Frowning, Lu Yi immersed himself in his perception. Soon, a look of bewilderment appeared on his face. He could clearly feel that there was something new inside the Pan Mountain blade. It was probably the black liquid that made up the soul-severing blade. The black liquid filled every corner of the Pan Mountain blade, perfectly fusing with the blade. There was no longer any distinction between them. Moreover, after dissolving all the restrictions, these strange things settled down. Lu Yi tried to control them. They were as smooth as an extension of his body. He could control these strange things and circulate them according to his will. He could even extract them from the saber. At first, he didn't think too much about it. But gradually, Lu Ye's expression turned solemn. A bold idea wildly surged in his mind. Chapter 1058. The black liquid had merged perfectly with the blade and was under his control. Did that mean he could use the black liquid to build seals inside the blade? If he could, as long as he built enough seals, the Pan Mountain blade could return to its original quality, or even surpass it. This meant that from now on, the Pan Mountain blade would become a personal weapon that he could change its quality to his will. If this could be done, it would be a great help to Lu Yi. Lu Yi had always been worried about one thing. That was to see how far the Pan Mountain saber could accompany him as he grew stronger. This was also the reason why most weapon cultivators felt awkward. Weapon cultivators had very high requirements for their personal weapons. After a long period of companionship, growth, and killing enemies, the weapon cultivator would be able to communicate with his weapon. With the Pan Mountain saber in hand, Lu Yi would be able to display his full strength. It was the same for other weapon cultivators. However, if he were to switch to another weapon, not only would his strength be weakened, but it would also affect his strength. When powerful cultivators fought, any external influence could be fatal. Therefore, Lu Yi would rather spend more contribution points to upgrade his Panshan saber than change to a long saber. If he wanted to change, there were plenty of long saber-type magic tools in the War Merit Pavilion that he could use. However, the Pan Mountain blade's foundation was too weak. It was originally a low-grade spiritual weapon. It could be upgraded to a high-grade spiritual weapon or even a magic weapon, but could it be upgraded to a high-grade spiritual treasure? Maybe not. The process of upgrading the Pan Mountain blade was extremely risky. If the upgrade failed, the Pan Mountain blade might shatter. At that time, even if Lu Yi found a tailor-made Pan Mountain blade, it wouldn't be the Pan Mountain blade anymore. It would need to be nurtured and reconnected with. Especially since Lu Ye's cultivation was increasing rapidly, the Pan Mountain blade was upgrading at a high rate. This increased the risk of future upgrades. He was now in the Spirit Sea realm. The Pan Mountain blade wasn't suitable for him anymore. It was time to upgrade it again. His original plan was to wait until he was free to deal with this matter himself and accumulate more experience. There were too many uncertainties if he always went to the Tianji treasury to upgrade the Pan Mountain blade. He couldn't be sure how much effort they put into upgrading the Pan Mountain blade. Upgrading one's cultivation would lead to all sorts of problems that needed to be dealt with. However, the unforeseen event before Lu Yi saw a possibility. If his guess was correct, Then he wouldn't have to worry about upgrading the Pan Mountain Saber anymore. He could change the quality of the Pan Mountain Saber at any time, making it more suitable for his current realm. After thinking about it for a moment, Lu Yi felt that it should be feasible. The fact that the black liquid that made up the soul-severing blade could be controlled at will was a signal in itself. After making up his mind, Lu Yi channeled his divine will into the Pan Shan Saber. To control the black liquid, one had to rely on one's own divine sense. This was something that Lu Yi had already verified just now. Urging spiritual energy was useless. With a surge of his spiritual will, the black liquid inside the Pan Mountain Saber turned into tiny yin and yang elements, quickly forming a spiritual pattern. Withdrawing his divine sense, the spirit rune was fixed inside the Pan Mountain Saber. Because it had already fused with the Pan Mountain Saber, it didn't cause any damage to the inside of the saber. This was a restriction. It was really feasible. Lu Ye's interest was piqued, and he continued to work. After a while, the Pan Mountain Saber had 9 additional restrictions. It was a low-grade spiritual weapon. He tried to channel his spiritual energy into the saber, and the restrictions operated smoothly, perfectly displaying their effects. After fiddling with the saber for a while, Lu Yi dispersed the restrictions. Just now, it was just an experiment. Now that he was sure that the idea was feasible, he had to plan it well. The foundation of restrictions in a spiritual weapon was the spiritual pattern. A sharpness spiritual pattern was a restriction, and a consolidation spiritual pattern was also a restriction. Their effects were different. Spiritual weapons of the same quality could be heavier, sharper, or more elegant. It wasn't just because of the different materials used to refine them, but also because of the proportion of restrictions inside. The more consolidation restrictions there were, the sturdier the spiritual weapon would be. The more sharpness there were, the sharper the spiritual weapon would be. Lu Yi had to consider how to match the different types of restrictions. In the past, when the Pan Mountain Saber was being upgraded, he would look for Master Yu and simply state his requirements. Then, Master Yu would do whatever he wanted. Whether the finished product was good or bad, whether it could satisfy his requirements, or whether it was to his liking, all depended on Master Yu's skills. Myriad worlds Daluo. However, it was different now. What he was doing now was equivalent to customizing a weapon for himself. Only he himself knew what he needed the most. All along, Lu Ye's requirements for the Pan Mountain Saber were to be heavy. After all, he was going to use the saber in close combat. If it wasn't heavy enough, it would break easily. Therefore, he had to have more consolidation restrictions to ensure that the Pan Mountain Saber wouldn't be damaged in battle. He also had to have sharpness. Although he would activate the sharpness spiritual pattern to strengthen the saber, it wouldn't be good if the Pan Mountain Saber itself wasn't sharp enough. In the future, he would have to fight with Divine Sea Realm cultivators. At this level of cultivation, he would be very protective of himself. A weapon that wasn't sharp enough wouldn't be of much use in battle. Heavy pressure was a good thing. It had to be added, and the quantity couldn't be too small. Although the Pan Mountain Saber wasn't light, it wasn't heavy either. However, if the heavy pressure spiritual pattern was activated in battle, it was clearly a slash, but after receiving the attack, one would find that it was as heavy as a mountain. Could one block it? Of course, the reality wouldn't be so exaggerated. However, the existence of the heavy pressure restriction would definitely make Lu Yi more powerful in battle. He would be able to unleash his physical strength to a greater extent. Thorns could be used. Sometimes, it would be difficult to deal effective damage to a strong enemy. The existence of the thorns restriction could turn a small injury into a big injury. Could he add restrictions like lightning attraction or golden arc to the Pan Mountain Saber? It was clearly a slash, but if it was activated with lightning attraction technique and golden arc slash, it seemed to be able to catch the enemy off guard. Lu Yi found that there were too many restrictions to choose from. The source came from his talent tree. Now, there were a total of 40 spiritual patterns activated on his talent tree. Although many of them weren't suitable to be built into weapons, there were still some that were suitable. After pondering for a long time, he finally abandoned some of his fancy ideas. The restrictions within weapons were the same as what cultivators learned. They were all about quality and not complexity. If he were to make so many restrictions, he would just be dividing up the ratio of restrictions for no reason. It might not be of much use. If he really wanted to activate a spell, Lu Yi could do it himself. There was no need to waste the restrictions on the Pan Mountain Saber. In the end, he decided to use the Pan Mountain Saber. The restrictions within the Pan Mountain Saber focused on sharpness, supplemented by heavy pressure, and added 2 thorns. He immediately got to work. With a surge of his spiritual sense, he controlled the black liquid within the saber to construct restrictions. Time passed. The spiritual patterns that Lu Yi chose were all activated on his talent tree. Constructing them was easy and didn't take much effort at all. Controlling the black liquid was even easier. With the combination of the two, the Pan Mountain Saber's quality increased as the number of restrictions increased. Low-grade spiritual weapon, middle grade, high grade, supreme grade, low-grade magic weapon, middle grade magic weapon. In just a short while, he was done. Carefully looking at the Pan Mountain Saber on his lap, it didn't seem to have changed at all. It was still as black as ink, simple and unadorned. However, compared to before, the Pan Mountain Saber had undergone a complete transformation. Although the Pan Mountain Saber from before was a magic weapon, it was only a low-grade magic weapon of the lowest quality. It contained 72 restrictions. After all, the last time Lu Yi upgraded the Pan Mountain Saber was when it was still in the Cloud River realm. Cloud River realm cultivators couldn't use items of too high quality. In the entire True Lake realm, he didn't upgrade the Pan Mountain Saber. Strictly speaking, the Pan Mountain Saber couldn't keep up with his cultivation anymore. Now, a total of 180 restrictions were hidden within the Pan Mountain Saber. This saber that had followed Lu Yi everywhere had finally been upgraded to a supreme-grade magic weapon. One more step and it would be a spiritual treasure. Actually, Lu Yi could also upgrade the Pan Mountain Saber to a spiritual treasure. After all, it was a simple matter for him to construct a few more spiritual patterns. The reason why he hadn't done so was because he needed to familiarize himself with the process. The upgrade from a low-grade magic weapon to a spiritual treasure was too big. It would definitely affect his ability to unleash his full strength. The Pan Mountain Saber's quality was just right. Furthermore, the quality of the Pan Mountain Saber was also a problem. The current Pan Mountain Saber was made by Master Yu. Although she added some materials when she refined it, it was only enough to increase the quality of the Pan Mountain Saber to the point where it could bear the weight of magic weapon restrictions. If Lu Yi really upgraded the Pan Mountain Saber to a spiritual treasure, the current quality of the Pan Mountain Saber might not be enough. He didn't want the Pan Mountain Saber to suddenly break in the middle of an intense battle. It was easy to solve this problem. He only needed to reforge it and find more precious materials to improve the quality of the Pan Mountain Saber. Lu Yi could do this himself. It wouldn't be too late for him to do it in the future. He picked up the Pan Mountain Saber and poured his spiritual energy into it. He immediately felt the difference in the Pan Mountain Saber. The consumption of his spiritual energy was more than 3 times greater than before. This was because the number of restrictions within the saber had increased. Activating those restrictions required a large amount of spiritual energy. This would undoubtedly make it easier for him to unleash his full strength. On the pitch-black blade of the Pan Mountain Saber, there was a layer of aura that was hard to detect. It was the aura of sharpness. The restrictions that Lu Yi had placed in the Pan Mountain Saber this time were quite sharp. Once activated, the saber would naturally become sharp. Looking at the Pan Mountain Saber, Lu Yi was extremely satisfied. This was truly a case of, there can be no construction without destruction. The items in the War Merit Pavilion were truly fair. The 500,000 battle merits were worth it. If Lu Yi had known that the soul-severing saber had such a special characteristic, he wouldn't have hesitated even if it was 1,000,000. Chapter 1059. Battle merits were something that could be obtained in a sustainable manner. However, there was only one soul-slashing blade. How could Lu Yi know which was more important? Now, as long as the material of the Pan Mountain blade met the requirements, he could add more restrictions to improve its quality. This would save him the trouble of finding people to upgrade it in the future. Moreover, this blade had the ability to injure the divine soul. This was the rarest thing. Lu Yi wanted to find someone to test his blade on. For a weapon cultivator like him, he was always itching to test his blade when his weapon had improved by leaps and bounds. However, considering his current identity as Li Taibai, he could only give up. Lin Yu was very efficient. The next day, she brought the appointment order from the Myriad Demon City. Li Taibai was appointed as the Junior Pass Lord of the Dark Moon Forest Pass to assist in guarding the pass. Lu Yi did not check his Myriad Demon's Ridge battlefield mark. Once it was activated, it would only last for a few hours. However, he believed that if he really checked it, there would definitely be changes to his status. Under normal circumstances, even if Lu Yi had reached the Divine Sea Realm, he was not qualified to be the Junior Pass Lord. This was because he did not have any achievements to show and did not make any substantial contributions to the Myriad Demon's Ridge. He could not even meet the requirements of a military rank. Now that the situation in the 9 states was changing, both the Haotian Alliance and the Myriad Demon's Ridge had changed some of their old rules. They were more inclined to do things at their own discretion. Lin Yu could not do anything alone at the Dark Moon Forest Pass. Coincidentally, she caught a wild Divine Sea Realm cultivator and asked her to act as a guarantor. The Myriad Demons City naturally agreed. Now they needed people everywhere. Although a newly promoted Divine Sea Realm cultivator was nothing, he was still a Divine Sea Realm cultivator. Lu Yi could not help but sigh. He was only the leader of a small team at the Haotian Alliance. He had not been heard from for 2 years and was even rudely dismissed. However, he was entrusted with an important task at the Myriad Demon's Ridge and became the Junior Pass Lord of a Pass. In the Dark Moon Forest Pass, he was only second to one person and above everyone else. Life was really unpredictable. Of course, he also knew that this was a special situation. A team of cultivators encountered some trouble 400 miles east. There are Divine Sea Realm insects there. We need you to go there. After giving the appointment order, Lin Yu ordered Lu Yi without hesitation. That was what the two of them at the Spirit Sea Realm had to do. The appearance of the insect plague was a great calamity for the 9 regions, but for many cultivators, it was a sumptuous feast. As long as they survived this great calamity, they could continuously obtain military merits and quickly improve their cultivation. This was an opportunity that they had never had before. Therefore, whether it was the Haotian Alliance or the Myriad Demon's Ridge, many cultivators were trying their best to kill the insects. Firstly, it was to protect the stability of the 9 regions. Secondly, it was for themselves. Most of the cultivators in the Dark Moon Forest Pass were scattered outside, looking for insectoids to kill. The few who stayed behind were either resting or recuperating. They would leave soon. This was impossible in the past. After all, the Shocking Waves Lake Pass of the Haotian Alliance was just 1,000 miles away. If their own defensive power became weak, it would be easy for the enemy to take advantage of them. However, under the influence of the current situation, both sides had tacitly stopped their large-scale attacks. Hence, even though Dark Moon Forest Pass's defense was weak, they did not have to worry about being ambushed by Shocking Waves Lake Pass. Of course, small-scale conflicts were unavoidable. As the Spirit Sea Realm cultivators guarding the pass, they did not have to take action under normal circumstances. However, if their subordinates discovered a Spirit Sea Realm insectoid and were unable to deal with it, they would need to take action to kill it. It was also because of this that Lin Yu was extremely tired recently. In name, she was the Great Mountain Pass's lord and enjoyed boundless glory. However, in reality, she was running around saving people. Now that she finally found a strong man, she naturally needed Lu Yi to take care of it. Firstly, she really needed to rest. Secondly, she wanted to test Lu Ye's strength. When Li Taibai was at the 3rd Order True Lake Realm, he could instantly kill a 7th Order True Lake Realm cultivator. She once thought that he was a rising star who could rival Sect Exterminating Yi. Now that he had reached the Spirit Sea Realm, his strength was definitely not weak. Dealing with a Spirit Sea Realm insectoid shouldn't be a problem. Lu Yi could only obey the Great Mountain Pass's lord's orders. Furthermore, even without this order, he had to make a trip out. He could not stay at the Dark Moon Forest Pass forever. Without any delay, a streak of sword light shot out. Lu Yi had already shot into the air, heading east. After reaching the Spirit Sea realm, his flying speed had increased by a lot. Not to mention, Lu Yi was now flying on his sword. Along the way, there were occasionally insectoids blocking his path. His figure did not stop. The sword gourd at his waist slashed out with sword chi, cutting the insectoids in half. Their corpse blood splattered everywhere. A few hundred kilometers was covered in a short time. Looking down from the sky, a large number of insectoids were gathered below. These insectoids looked like spiders, but only in terms of shape. This was because the most obvious sign of the insectoids was the thick shell on their bodies. No matter what form they were in, it was the same. Ordinary spiders did not have such a shell. These insectoids were not small. Each of them was the size of a baby. They crawled quickly on the ground, spitting out spider silk from their mouths. A group of more than 10 people was surrounded in the middle, unable to advance or retreat. These people were not weak. Most of them were in the True Lake realm. A few of them were in the Cloud River realm. Under normal circumstances, even if they could not defeat these insectoids, escaping would not be a problem. However, a giant spider web in the sky cut off their hopes of escape. There was a house-sized insectoid crawling on the spider web. Its entire body emitted a ferocious aura. Some cultivators had already been killed and were being eaten by this insectoid. In this situation, it was obvious that a large insectoid had brought its offspring out to hunt. In the end, it bumped into this group of cultivators. The small spiders were in charge of surrounding the cultivators, not giving them any chance to escape. The large spider was in charge of feasting. When Lu Yi arrived, the defensive perimeter of the cultivators was less than 300 feet away. It could be said that they were in danger. On the spider web, the large spider had also finished eating the cultivators and was about to move on to another target. It seemed like this insectoid was quite particular. It knew how to trap its prey here so that it could eat fresh ones at any time. As if sensing Lu Yi's aura, the insectoid instincts made the large spider raise its compound eyes to look in Lu Yi's direction. Then, its mouthpart squirmed and a strand of spider silk shot towards Lu Yi. The trapped cultivators also saw Lu Yi. One of them shouted, "Hold on, someone is coming to save us." As soon as he said that, the spider silk suddenly turned into a spider web and tightly wrapped around Lu Yi. The face of the cultivator who shouted turned green. He did not recognize Lu Yi, nor did he know the background of this divine ocean realm cultivator. He only felt that this guy was too impulsive. As a divine ocean realm cultivator, he rashly approached the battlefield. Now that he was trapped, he would most likely die. One had to know that the spider silk was poisonous. However, just as this thought flashed through his mind, a ball of fire suddenly appeared in midair. The fire rolled and retracted. Lu Yi's figure reappeared. The spider web that wrapped around him was also burned clean. Then, there was the clear sound of a sword chime. A few sword lights flew out from the sword gourd as if someone was waving a brush in the air. The sword lights turned into streaks of light and crossed the space where the big spider was. Calligraphy sword art. This was the sword Dao inheritance from the soaring dragon realm. Lu Yi had taught it to Li Baxian, so he could use it himself. Under the soaring dragon realm's origin imprint, he had an extremely strong sword cultivation foundation. Now that he had used the calligraphy sword art, even if the sword master of the North Profound Sword Sect came, he would have to praise him as a good sword cultivator. The shell on the large spider's body did not provide it with any protection. As Lu Yi's cultivation increased, the power of the sword gourd also increased greatly. Sword cultivators were known for their killing. Under these sword lights, the large spider's body immediately stiffened. However, the sword lights did not stop. Under Lu Yi's control, they flew into the swarm of insects. As they passed by silently, many insectoids fell one after another. When the sword lights slowly dissipated, the large encirclement had been cleared out. The small spiders were dead or injured. The large spider hanging in the spider web in the sky was also torn apart at this moment. Corpse blood spilled everywhere. The dozen or so cultivators were all shocked. They all used their methods to push out. The death of the large spider had a great impact on the small spiders. They became chaotic, and the more they attacked, the less of a threat they would pose to the cultivators. Lu Yi strolled in the sky casually. Occasionally, a sword light would shoot out from the sword gourd. However, he could clearly see that the dozen or so people below did not seem to be in the same group. Originally, they were trapped and could still gather together when they were in danger. However, as the biggest danger was eliminated, the group of people split into two groups. Lu Yi immediately understood that some of them were cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge. The other group should be from the Grand Heaven Alliance. It was not new for cultivators from the two factions to work together. In some of the secret realms in the Cloud River battlefield, there were precedents of cultivators from the two factions working together. The Great Genetic Age. However, that was because of the circumstances. In the Land of the Nine States, it was very rare to see such a thing. With more than 10 people working together and Lu Yi supporting them from the side, all the insects were killed in the time it took to burn a stick of incense. The two groups of people were panting, but they looked at Lu Yi in the sky cautiously and anxiously. The cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance did not know who he was, and the few cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge did not know who he was either. Lu Yi was too lazy to explain. He said casually, "Why are we still here? Are we waiting for the insects to counterattack?" The battle just now had caused quite a commotion. If there were any insects nearby, they would definitely be attracted. The two leaders of the two groups quickly bowed. "Thank you for saving us, sir." There was no need to figure out Lu Ye's background. Looking at his attitude, no matter which faction he was from, he had no intention of making things difficult for them. The two groups of people flew off in different directions and soon disappeared from sight. Lu Yi continued to move forward. He flew for another 100 miles before he pressed down on the sword light and flew into a crack in the ground below. After the great change in the Land of the Nine States, there were many such cracks in the ground. The insects crawled out from these cracks. Chapter 1060. When Lu Yi came in, he saw a large number of insects climbing up at a glance. He killed a circle and cleared out the nearby insects before finding a secluded place to summon his doppelganger. After a while, another figure that looked exactly like Lu Yi appeared. He took off the scarlet dragon battle robe and let his doppelganger wear it. He also took off the sword gourd from his waist and hung it on his doppelganger's waist. He also left 2 storage bags for his doppelganger to store some supplies. After everything was done, the doppelganger controlled the sword light and rushed out of the fissure, heading towards Dark Moon Forest Pass. The main body concealed itself and quietly left the fissure, heading towards Grand Sky City. Lu Ye's vision began to become strange as 2 different scenes appeared in his vision at the same time. Fortunately, Lu Yi had experienced this before, and now that he had reached the Divine Sea Realm, his divine sense was much stronger, so this change didn't affect him much. He was just doing 2 things at once. Lu Yi had a bad feeling. He had this feeling since yesterday, but it wasn't obvious at that time, so he didn't pay much attention to it. Today, this feeling had become much clearer. Lu Yi didn't know what was going on. He was sure that no one was watching him nearby, but he had this feeling that he was being watched. He didn't think it was an illusion. Now that he was in the Divine Sea Realm, his perception was much stronger than that of a true Lake Realm cultivator. Since he had this feeling, there must be a reason. It was hard to determine the source for the time being. After traveling a few dozen kilometers, Lu Yi removed his concealment and leaped into the air. Half an hour later, a streak of light flew straight towards this side. The person flying from this direction should be someone from Grand Sky Union. Judging from the other party's spirit energy fluctuations, he was at least in the 3rd order Divine Sea Realm. Lu Yi didn't know who it was, so he avoided it slightly. It was common sense for those with lower cultivation to avoid those with higher cultivation when flying high in the sky. Naturally, the way to avoid was not fixed. One could lower their altitude or move left and right as they wished. Lu Yi chose to lower his altitude. But he didn't expect that when he lowered his altitude, the other party would also lower their altitude. The two figures quickly approached each other. Just as Lu Yi was about to dodge again, the other party spoke from afar. "Oh, is it Lu Yi, little friend Lu?" Lu Yi was slightly stunned. He didn't expect this person to know him, so he replied, "Yes." That person was a bit surprised. "Little friend Lu has actually reached the Divine Sea realm. Congratulations." One Lu Yi frowned. "How should I address you?" "This one is Clear Moon Sect's Zhang Song." As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved it with his back facing Lu Yi, causing a dot of blue light to appear before her eyes. Lu Yi was still trying to figure out which sect the Pure Moon Sect was. Only sects above the 3rd grade could produce a Divine Sea Realm warrior. Although he didn't know much about the sects above the 3rd grade in the military province, he had at least heard of their names. There was no such thing as the Pure Moon Sect above the 3rd rank. Unexpectedly, Zhang Song's speed suddenly increased, and he instantly appeared in front of Lu Yi. Spiritual qi and blood surged all over his body as he threw a punch at him. This fist was heavy and powerful. If it was Lu Yi who was still in the True Lake stage, he definitely wouldn't have been able to receive it. This turn of events greatly surprised Lu Yi. When the other party showed the Haotian Alliance's battlefield imprint to him, he naturally felt that this person was on his side, so he instinctively lowered his guard. Lu Yi did lower his guard a bit, but because he always felt like he was being watched in the dark, he still maintained a bit of caution. He wasn't guarding against Zhang Song, but the enemy who might be hiding in the dark. This trace of vigilance gave him a chance to react quickly. With a clang, the Pan Mountain saber was unsheathed, and a sharp saber light was slashed out. With a boom, spiritual energy exploded, and a blast of air swept out. Both of them were shocked. Shock flashed across Zhang Song's face. He had approached Lu Yi unexpectedly and launched a sneak attack with a cultivation 2 levels higher than Lu Yi's. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to miss. In order to ensure the success rate of his sneak attack, he even deliberately fabricated the Pure Moon Sect to distract Lu Yi's attention. Who would have thought that after all this scheming he still failed to achieve his goal? The moment he saw Lu Yi, he knew that the information was wrong. Lu Yi wasn't in the True Lake stage, he had already reached the Divine Sea stage. However, because he felt that Lu Yi, a new Divine Sea stage cultivator, might not be able to display much strength, he continued with his plan. He thought that it would be easy, but who knew that he would kick an iron plate? Lu Yi's reaction was fast, and his saber was extremely agile. Moreover, the power transmitted from the saber couldn't be underestimated. How could a new Divine Sea stage cultivator have such strength? As he pondered, Lu Yi's second saber slashed down. Zhang Song hurriedly raised his arms, and his dense qi and spiritual energy converged to form a thick defense. Peak boom! Under the powerful force, Zhang Song felt that his opponent wasn't slashing down with a saber, but with a mountain. What made him even more uneasy was that this saber was a bit too sharp. His defense as a physique cultivator showed signs of being broken. The power of the upgraded mountain saber was vividly displayed at this moment. There were a total of 180 barriers and many heavy pressure spirit inscriptions hidden within them. Every time Lu Yi's saber slashed down, not only did it contain his own strength, but it also contained the terrifying pressure formed by these heavy pressure spirit inscriptions. With these two factors superimposed, it wasn't as simple as 1 + 1. Even Zhang Song, a physique cultivator, found it difficult to resist. The power of the mountain saber was only secondary to this effect. The most important factor was Lu Yi's own foundation. Lu Yi had spent more than half a year trying to break through from the True Lake 9th Order to the Divine Sea. In the end, he had even taken the risk of diving deep into the Blood Sea in order to continuously accumulate his physical strength, but because he had already formed his divine sense, he had never been able to find an opportunity to break through. As a result, his physical strength had only grown stronger over time. If an average cultivator only needed to accumulate enough physical strength to fill a wine jug when they broke through to the Divine Sea stage, Lu Ye's physical strength had exceeded that of a wine jug when he reached the true Lake Ninth Order, the kind of wine jug that could hold 10 kilograms of wine. The process of breaking through to the Divine Sea stage was full of ups and downs, but after crossing that shackle, everything became clear. With a more solid foundation and a more tenacious foundation, the process of breaking through to the Divine Sea stage was completely different, bringing about earth-shaking changes in his strength, allowing Lu Yi to continue his previous ability to kill enemies above his own realm. Coupled with the reborn mountain saber, what did a trivial third-order Divine Sea cultivator count for? Coupled with the tempering of more than 70 old seniors over several months, Lu Yi didn't even know where his current limits were. Having seen the ferocious might of a fierce tiger, how could he care less about a dog's baring its fangs? When the first saber slashed down, it could barely be considered a draw because Lu Yi had acted hastily. By the second saber strike, the protective barrier around Zhang Song's body was shaking violently, and his vitality was tumbling. Lu Ye's saber was incredibly fast, and it was followed by a third saber strike. Like a balloon being punctured, Zhang Song's protective barrier of blood qi and spirit energy was directly cut open. The sharp mountain saber cut a bloody line across his crisscrossed arms, and under the tremendous pressure, Zhang Song's body was sent plummeting downwards. Zhang Song showed a look of horror. Not only was he shocked by the terrifying strength that Lu Yi had suddenly erupted with, but he was even more horrified by what he was feeling at this moment. He was a body cultivator, so his physique was powerful and his recovery ability was powerful. At his level of cultivation, his physique was the most powerful thing he could rely on. In a confrontation between cultivators in the same realm, there was basically no cultivator who could destroy his physique. Even the mountain saber with 180 spirit arrays couldn't do anything to him. All it did was leave a bloody gash on his arms. This kind of flesh wound was nothing to a body cultivator with thick skin and thick physique, and could be easily healed. However, the feeling of being injured made Zhang Song's heart beat wildly. Because the moment the mountain saber cut him, his soul actually felt pain, as if an invisible saber had cut into his spirit sea. But he didn't notice any signs of Lu Yi urging his spiritual energy. As his body fell, Lu Yi followed him like a shadow, his saber light enveloping him. Zhang Song roared, his face full of humiliation. He had launched a sneak attack with a cultivation 2 minor realms higher than his own, yet he had been beaten. For a hot-tempered body cultivator, this was absolutely intolerable. He wanted to fight back, but he had lost the initiative, so there was no room for him to fight back. The only thing he could do was protect himself with all his might. But every time Lu Ye's saber came down, his soul would hurt, making it difficult for him to urge his divine sense to fight with Lu Ye's soul. Kong. Zhang Song's body slammed heavily on the ground like a meteorite falling from the sky, creating a huge crater in the ground. For a moment he was dizzy. His soul was in turmoil, making it difficult for him to concentrate. He really couldn't understand what the other party had done to him. Why was there no fluctuation of spiritual energy, but his soul was damaged? He knew that this mission was a failure. He was no match for the other party, so what was the point of talking about the mission? What he needed to do now was to escape quickly and report the news. Dust and smoke rose, turning into a natural cover. Zhang Song's qi and blood surged, and he instantly fled in a direction. However, Lu Yi seemed to have foreseen this and blocked his way, holding a saber in his hand and thrusting it forward. Saber light filled the sky like falling stars, enveloping Zhang Song. With a sizzling sound, Zhang Song's body shook again, and dozens of bloody holes appeared on the surface of his body. His forward figure couldn't help but stop and tumble backwards. As expected of a body cultivator, his skin was rough and his flesh thick. If it were Lu Xiu's fragile body, these injuries would have been fatal, but Zhang Song looked miserable, but his life was not in danger. Stabilizing his body with difficulty, he half knelt on the ground. The pain in his soul became more and more obvious, as if his entire soul was being torn apart, making his expression look extremely terrifying. Lu Yi raised his left hand, and as his spirit qi surged, a strange scene appeared. The blood flowing from Zhang Song's wounds seemed to have turned into living creatures, climbing all over his body, turning into bloody lines in the blink of an eye, covering his entire body. Chapter 1061. As Lu Yi clenched his fist, the strands of blood suddenly tightened, binding Zhang Song tightly like a rope. Blood Spirit Bind. A type of Blood Dao secret technique. It had to be said that many of the blood race's secret techniques were extremely strange and mysterious. They originated from their bloodline inheritance and could not be used by non-bloods. Lu Yi had refined a drop of saint blood and used it to break through to the divine sea realm. The power of his talent tree had burned away the strange power in the saint blood that was enough to transform Lu Yi into a blood race cultivator, allowing him to obtain an incomplete blood race bloodline inheritance. His eyelids drooped as he raised his blade and came before Zhang Song. His eyelids drooped as he asked, "Why?" He couldn't understand why this person, who was obviously from Grand Heaven Alliance, would attack him. Moreover, he had only returned to the 9 states 2 days ago. Was it a coincidence? Unlikely, this person seemed to have come specifically for him. However, he obviously didn't know that Lu Yi had broken through to the divine sea realm, which was why he was so surprised when they met. Since there was no enmity between them, there must be someone behind the scenes. On the Hidden Sky Alliance's side, the only one who wanted to kill him on the surface was Lu Yueme. However, she had been severely taught a lesson by the sect master last time, so she might not have the courage to do so now. Zhou Kuei could barely be considered half a person, and Shang Yibei had even ordered a third-order divine sea realm cultivator to kill him. It wasn't that Lu Yi was looking down on him, but that he was simply stating the facts. Besides the two of them, who else could have a grudge with him? What Lu Yi was more concerned about was whether the bad feeling he was feeling was related to this Zhang Song. He had to figure it out. In fact, he could activate a little of the Divine Spirit Rune to explore the whole story, but ever since he activated this Spirit Rune in the blood refining realm, Lu Yi decided that he would not use it unless he had no other choice, because that feeling was simply too uncomfortable. Zhang Song was still struggling, but he was bound by the blood spirit bind and his soul was damaged, so how could he have the strength to break free? His heart sank, knowing that not only had he failed his mission, but his fate was also in danger. He really hadn't expected that Lu Yi's ability would be so great. He thought that with his third-order divine sea realm cultivation, it would be a piece of cake to capture Lu Yi. In the end, he was captured alive. In a cultivator's battle, defeating, killing, and capturing were 3 completely different concepts. Each step was more difficult than the last. Lu Yi being able to capture him alive so easily meant that his strength far surpassed the third-order divine sea realm. What was even more difficult for Yang Kai to accept was that he didn't even know where this person's limits were. Feeling the sharp aura of the long saber against his neck, Zhang Song chuckled. "You want to know why? Come and ask in the Yellow Springs." Lu Yi's expression changed and he hurriedly urged his divine sense to form an invisible shockwave that blasted towards Zhang Song. However, it was still too late. With a soft puff, it was as if something had exploded in Zhang Song's mind. Then, his neck tilted and he fell limply to the ground. Lu Yi hurriedly stepped forward and checked on Zhang Song's condition. He found that his life force had indeed been cut off. This scene seemed familiar. It reminded him of his experience in the Qin family of Me 2 years ago. Back then, the patriarch of the Qin family, Qin Tianxue, had strangely died in front of him. Later, he was captured by Yu Daiwei and brought to a nameless sealed world. When he chatted with Taishan, he used words to test him and confirmed that the Qin family was from Taishan. It was now clear who the mastermind behind the scenes was. Back in the Qin family, his team was inexplicably attacked. In the end, he summoned the Dragon Emperor and went on a killing spree to resolve the crisis. Now, after returning to the 9 states for 2 days, someone came to find trouble with him for no reason. It seemed that Taishan already knew that he had returned to the 9 states. That's right. Back then, he had exchanged the battlefield imprint with Yu Daiwei. At that time, he was thinking of using it to locate Yu Daiwei's location. Because he was going to cause trouble in the nameless secret realm, if he could contact Yu Daiwei through the imprint, it meant that she was in the secret realm. If Yu Daiwei's mark couldn't contact her, it meant that she had left the sealed world. Then, Lu Yi could put down his scruples and do whatever he wanted. But he didn't expect that he would be used by the other party today. Yu Daiwei obviously found that his battlefield marks could be contacted, so she confirmed that he had returned to the 9 states. But perhaps she couldn't come in time, so she sent Zhang Song to intercept him. But whether it was her or Zhang Song, they both underestimated his strength, which led to Zhang Song's death. This was human nature. 2 years ago, Lu Ye's cultivation was only at the 5th order True Lake realm. Even if Zhang Song confirmed that he had reached the Divine Sea realm when he saw him, he would not take him seriously. As a result, he was beaten to a pulp by Lu Yi in a single confrontation. The situation was generally clear, but there was still one thing that Lu Yi couldn't understand. What method did Tai Shan use to control Zhang Song? He would rather die than say a word. That day, the Qin family was the same. Dao soldiers might be loyal to Tai Shan, but whether it was the Qin family or Zhang Song, they were obviously not Dao soldiers. This kind of method that could make his subordinates face death with equanimity was too inconceivable. The source should be in their minds, because whether it was Qin Tianque or Zhang Song, Lu Yi heard a slight sound in their minds before they died. He quickly squatted down and reached out to touch Zhang Song's forehead, using his divine sense to investigate. But he couldn't find anything. Zhang Song was dead, but the feeling of being watched by someone didn't disappear. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. It seemed that the source of this feeling wasn't Zhang Song. If it wasn't Zhang Song, then it had to be Tai Shan or Yu Daiwei. It was most likely the latter. Tai Shan was the mastermind behind the scenes, and there were many capable people under his command. It was impossible for him to do everything himself. Did he use the tracking disc? Lu Yi was enlightened. Although he had been tracked by others before, his cultivation was still low at that time, unlike now. Because of his Divine Sea realm cultivation, his strong foundation temperature made his perception extremely sharp, so he was able to sense the trace of tracking in his mind. The stronger the feeling was, the closer the other party was to him. Lu Ye's fighting spirit soared. To be honest, the battle with Zhang Song just now hadn't been enjoyable. After he reached the Divine Sea realm, although he had been fighting every day, it was just a one-sided lesson from the old seniors. The old seniors of the blood refinement realm all knew the principle that jade couldn't be made into anything without being carved, so they didn't hold back at all. As long as it was within Lu Ye's tolerance, they were as fierce as they could be. No matter who he fought, Lu Yi was beaten until he was dizzy. However, the old seniors had a sense of propriety and wouldn't harm his foundation. Even if he was seriously injured, it wouldn't affect him from being hammered the next day. Immortal would adventure. In such a big environment, Lu Yi didn't know where his limit was, because he lost every battle. After returning to the 9 provinces, he killed 2 Divine Sea realm cultivators. The insect race was finished with a single blow. There was no room for him to fight. The battle with Zhang Song was also a quick and decisive one. He was now in urgent need of a suitable whetstone to test his strength. A cultivator who didn't know his limit wasn't a qualified cultivator. In the future, he would encounter all kinds of dangers. If he couldn't judge his own strength clearly, he would easily fall into some dangerous situations. Therefore, if Yu Daiwei really came to him, it would be a great opportunity. As for whether he could beat her or not, it was no longer within Lu Ye's consideration. If he couldn't beat her, then so be it. There was nothing to be ashamed of. There was a gap in their cultivation. He was still young. Although Yu Daiwei looked young, she was actually much older than him. There would come a time when he would surpass her. Moreover, if he couldn't beat her, he could run. Among the many secret skills of the blood race, the blood escape art was unparalleled. Once he used it, Yu Daiwei could only eat his dust. Since he had made up his mind, Lu Yi decided not to leave. He collected Zhang Song's belongings and put the corpse into his storage bag. A Divine Sea realm cultivator of the Grand Sky Alliance was actually a subordinate of Tai Shan. This was a big deal. He had to bring him back to Grand Sky City and report this to the chief. If there was one Zhang Song, would there be a second or a third? He didn't send a message to the chief or Gan Wudong. Now that the 9 states was in chaos, these two must be busy. There was no need to trouble them before he had full confidence in capturing the target. When Lu Yi was in the true lake realm, he would ask his elders for help when he was in danger. After all, he wasn't strong enough, so there was nothing he could do. But now that he was in the divine sea realm, how could he ask his elders for help every time? After waiting for half an hour, a stream of light rushed over from the distance. Yu Daiwei looked a little surprised because the development of the situation puzzled her. Although she was in the 8th order divine sea realm, it took her a lot of time to fly all the way from Thunder State to here. During this time, she found that Lu Yi was moving towards Grand Sky City through the guidance of the tracing disc. This forced her to dispatch Zhang Song to intercept him halfway. Otherwise, if Lu Yi entered Grand Sky City, she wouldn't have a chance to kill him. Logically speaking, there was no problem with Zhang Song taking action. How could a 3rd order divine sea realm cultivator go against a true lake realm cultivator? But the accident happened just like that. Zhang Song's battlefield mark suddenly collapsed, which undoubtedly meant that Zhang Song was dead. Subconsciously, she felt that there must be some kind of master hiding around Luya, otherwise, Zhang Song wouldn't have died for no reason. A 3rd order divine sea realm cultivator wasn't so easy to kill. From a distance, she saw a figure standing on a barren peak below. Focusing her eyes, who else could it be but Luya? Yu Daiwei immediately became vigilant. Looking around, she quickly spread out her divine sense. She was looking for the master hiding in the dark. Judging from Luya's posture, it was obvious that he knew that someone was using the tracking disc to track his whereabouts, but he didn't leave. Instead, he waited quietly in the wilderness. This was extremely unusual. Yu Daiwei felt that an inescapable net had been set up here. He immediately came to a stop about 10 miles away from Lu Yi. She couldn't be blamed for being so cautious. It was just an accurate inference based on the information she had. On the barren peak, Lu Yi looked up calmly at Yu Daiwei, who was rushing over. Everything was as expected. This woman was using the tracing disc to track his whereabouts, so Zhang Song must have been sent by her. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.